Good afternoon. James Riddle, First Baptist Church of Del Mar. I wanted to talk a little bit today about some trends that have occurred over the past 20 years or so theologically. And I want to talk a little bit about being a Southern Baptist in the midst of all this. I recently started reading Southern Baptist Consensus and Renewal at the request of probably the most theologically informed member of my congregation. And it's a book I actually had on my shelf and I forgot I had it. David Dockery wrote it. And I've only read, actually, believe it or not, a few pages of it. And I already have some interesting insights on it. I would like to say that this message here is for people, let's pick a good year to remember, people born 1975 or before. That's roughly 40 years old. I guess a person born in 75 would be 38 or 39 this year, depending on when their birthday came. And that captures most of my friends. I was born several years before that, but not too many years before that. I was real little back in 75. And so if you were about 40 and you grew up in a Southern Baptist church, you lived in a very structured world. RAs, GAs, the 1956 hymnal, because in 1975 I was only 6 years old, but our church wasn't that hip. We didn't have the 75 hymnal yet. We probably didn't get that till about 77 or so. Then we had the 75 hymnal. The 1940 hymnal was in some of the churches I would go to, but there were always the Broadman hymnal. 91, another one came out. That was the year I actually got saved. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, was on cradle roll, but was only born again in 92. The year after I graduated from college in 92, I became a Christian. So when I started seminary a couple of years after that, I was reading from the 91 hymnal and it was new. Now we have the 2008 hymnal. You could go to a Southern Baptist church anywhere in the country and they were reading out of the King James Bible for the most part, as Dr. Dockery speaks of in this book. When I was little, it was mostly King James, but the RSV, NIV, those things were starting to kind of slip in. The NIV had only been translated in part back then, I think, just the New Testament. So I didn't see an NIV probably until I was out of college. It got really big in the early 90s after the explosion of the 85 NIV study Bible. There was training union, there was choir practice. All these things were very standard. The Baptist Sunday School Board, which is now Lifeway, had standardized material. So we grew up in this regimented world. And some people have called the Southern Baptists the Roman Catholics of the South, because we're still mostly in the South. For the most part, Southern Baptists are Maryland to Florida to Texas. We have Southern Baptists in every state. But what's happened is we fought the battle of unorthodoxy in the sense that our seminaries have been corrected with the liberalism that was being taught. We're seeing a much stronger Reformed theology coming out of Southern and other areas. And it's been a good trend in general, whether you are on the Reformed side of the track or not. We have seen a very good improvement theologically. But what we're going to have to start doing in this culture today, looking at the trends that I have seen in my few 44 years, almost 45 years, we're going to have to start doing what D.A. Carson mentioned in his book, Gagging God, back in 96. We need to start drawing lines when drawing lines is rude. I have seen Southern Baptist churches years ago when I started in seminary. I've seen most little Southern Baptist churches around the country, a lot of them, smaller ones, 100 people, were hiring full-time pastors. Now they're hiring part-time pastors because they can't afford it. They're getting smaller and smaller. They're in that programmatic mode, moving forward the way they always have. Many of them don't even know theology. They just know the program. They know the rigmarole. They know, okay, the Herschel Hobbs commentary is going to come out this quarter. I'm going to read that. And nothing wrong with the Herschel Hobbs commentary, but they just know the literature. They know being a Southern Baptist, what it's about. Annie Armstrong, Lottie Moon. They understand these things. Okay, the cooperative program. And so what's happened over the years is theologically things have been changing, and we're going to have to start drawing lines because of these trends that have happened. We're also not only seeing little churches that can no longer afford a full-time pastor, we're seeing entire associations go into bivocational directors of missions. So it's not looking great in that sense with the convention. However, there is a gentleman, I can't tell you his name, but he is in the doctoral program I am in at Southeastern right now, and he actually wants to do a project dealing with associations in his doctoral project, which will be very interesting because I want to see the associations saved. But the associations, the churches, the convention, we're going to have to individually in our churches address these problems. We're going to have to draw lines when drawing lines is not popular. First of all, we're going to have to quit assuming orthodoxy. Don't assume everybody in your church knows the Bible. Do not assume because a person attends your church and has attended for years and gives a lot of money and all that they know the Bible, that they understand theology. This is what's happened over the years. Back in the 70s, many churches read the Bible. It clearly states, in 1 Timothy, there's no question, the gender of a pastor is male. There's no way around it, under it, over it. No matter how you look at it, a pastor is a man. I know the arguments. I've heard them. I've heard the arguments about the first 3 chapters of Genesis being poetry. So the idea of the woman being the man's helpmeet, that's not actually accurate. Adam and Eve didn't exist. I've heard the crazy arguments that are out there. They are heretical. And what we've done is we've said, okay, well, that church will ordain a female pastor. And so, well, we won't question that or worry about that. That's fine if it's another denomination, another church. But in your church, you need to understand the Bible is very clear on the gender of a pastor. Well, what's happened is, then in the 80s and the 90s, we started hearing, hey, there's a gay gene out there. In other words, a gene that would make a person not happy, as gay used to mean, but would make them a homosexual. And as I think we all know, homosexuality is a sin, like any sexual sin. So it's no worse than other sins in the sense that it is a sin. However, it is referred to as an abomination. I understand that. But fornication is a sin. Lust is a sin. And so what we've done is, in the 80s and 90s, we're saying this. And then what's happening now in the teens, in the 21st century, homosexual pastors are being ordained. And Southern Baptists are running around in circles thinking, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? Well, the good news is our convention has been saved in the sense that we are now Orthodox again instead of going liberal mainline. But it's going to get serious. We're going to start having our buildings shut down in states like Maryland, where our church is at, when we say we're not going to marry 2 men. We're not going to marry 2 women here. It's just not going to happen. It's going to start happening, so be prepared for it. This postmodern world we're living in was something I only studied in seminary. It's here now. It exists now. Back in the 80s and the 90s, it was just theory. Now it's reality. Now in churches and in seminaries and Bible colleges, people are questioning a 24-hour literal 6-day creation. People call it the Ken Ham model. And they say Christians can disagree. No, Bible-believing Christians cannot disagree. Day-age, incorrect. Gap theory, incorrect. Even though I would argue that is the closest thing to a roughly orthodox position, it's wrong. There is actually a Southern Baptist professor in recent years who wrote in his book that the first man and woman were given a collective amnesia as to their theistic evolutionary roots. That man taught for 6 years in a Southern Baptist seminary after teaching in a very liberal seminary that would not even, a Baptist seminary in Texas, that would not even give him his tenure because apparently he was too conservative for them. These are the things happening now. We are inconsistent, and what's happening is we're confusing our children. And whether a person likes the books that were written or not, Ken Ham co-wrote a couple of books in the past several years that really explain what's happened, especially with the creation issue, the age of the earth issue. Already gone. This book says basically once these kids get out of high school, they're gone. And they're not coming back to the church. And one of the big things they see is this inconsistency in not believing the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis, not wanting to stand up and make a strong stance against evolutionary atheism. Already compromised. Talks about the so-called Christian colleges. Please beware of Christian colleges. A lot of them do not teach the Bible as the inerrant Word of God. So what's happened is, as Southern Baptists, we've sit back and we've watched our landscape just theologically change. People are not standing up for the truth. We've got people in our churches that went out multiple times and voted to put people in office that believed in killing babies, that believed in homosexual marriage, that believed in radical redistribution of wealth, radical gun control, all these police state measures, the police state in general, the military state, blind nationalism. And we've put these people in for so many years into political offices. And now we're in position here with liberal theology and a government that's going to really be clamping down on us. We're going to have to know what we stand for. we're going to have to really know what we stand for and what we believe. So if you're an Orthodox person, you're basically biblically Orthodox. You believe the Bible is the inerrant Word of God. You subscribe, let's say, to the 1978 Chicago Statement of Inerrancy. I would say that we are fellow travelers. You may be a Methodist. You may be a Presbyterian. You may believe in a different view of baptism. You may not believe in a pre-trib, premillennial view of the return of Christ, but you believe the Bible is the Word of God. I'd say you are a theological friend of those of us that I put in that born 1975 or before conservative Southern Baptist Club. So if you are, and if you're younger, that's fine. I don't mind. I know several people within the convention and professorial positions and things like that that are several years younger than the group I'm talking about right now. There's pastors of big churches born after 1975. But if you're born 1975 or before, you're a Southern Baptist, you kind of bleed it, you grew up in the era I did, and I'll admit I'm on the later edge of that era, being that I'm only in my 40s. I don't remember how programmatic Southern Baptists really were. I've only studied it, but I did live through some of it in churches in North Carolina as a kid. But if you're in that group and you would like to just discuss different things theologically, how we can possibly just do something about this convention, about saving these churches, saving these associations, what ideas do you have? Because I really believe that the Southern Baptist model of doing missions, the cooperative program, the system that was set up many years ago is a great system. I still believe that Arthur Flake's 1922 book, I think it was, Building a Standard Sunday School, is still applicable today, believe it or not. There are timeless principles over 90 years old, but we have got to reach the people of today. Okay, we've got to reach the people of today. A guitar, a pair of drums, I've got no problem with that. A New King James Bible like I use, yes, no problem. We're not going to get into these issues. King James onlyism, hymnal onlyism, things like that. Even though there are good arguments for the King James text, there's good arguments for the hymns. What are we going to do? We're going to have to stand up in this ridiculous culture of compromise and stand by God's holy word. God bless.